This is just one of those situations where I'm like, this person is a horrible, horrendous human being, and I don't know why you're letting him treat you like this. That she keeps apologizing to him kind of makes me want to be sick, honestly. There's something about her responses to him that gives me the impression that she's terrified, or she's just a doormat and she's just letting him walk all over her because she doesn't have enough self-respect to tell him to stop, and that this is not an acceptable way to interact with your wife. So this is pretty awful. Like, this is a really dark one. Women have a reputation as being the more selective sex, but are they really? And what happens when they're not? That's our theme for today. We'll be talking about unplanned pregnancies, useless husbands, how partners color your experience of motherhood and make you insecure. Our first one is titled, He Doesn't Want to Have Anything to Do with Me or the Baby. Today makes 5 weeks. I've known him over 20 years. We were together as teenagers, broke up my sophomore year in college. He moved on, got married, and had 2 children, current ages 8 and 14. We've always stayed in touch in a cordial, friendly manner through the years. I never stopped caring for him, but I highly respected his marriage. In the past 2 years, we've been in a situationship, more on than off. And now I'm pregnant and he wants nothing to do with me. He said some really hurtful, mean things to me, something I would never have imagined. He wants me to terminate this pregnancy. He was like my best friend. He's been separated and divorced recently. The process started right before we started our thing again. This is my 3rd pregnancy. The previous 2 I terminated for various reasons. I don't have children and I don't want an abortion. Can anyone relate? Been through a similar situation. Now, this is already it's pretty dark. It's pretty dark and pretty unfortunate and quite painful for me to read. I don't know why women put themselves in this position repeatedly where they get pregnant with someone who they're not even in a relationship with. The fact that she already describes this as a situationship, and she says it's more on than off, which means that they, even as a situationship, they had periods of time where they weren't seeing each other. She says she highly respected his marriage. But, a lot of people will say around divorce statistics, they'll say something like 50% of all marriages end in divorce. In some places, it might even be up to 60% of all marriages end in divorce. And people throw around this number as though it's proof that marriage doesn't work. But actually, in a lot of cases, those are repeat divorces. So it's when people go through multiple marriages. And obviously, with every divorce you go through, the higher the likelihood that your next marriage is going to end in divorce as well. And so for me, if I were to try to get with someone whose relationship had broken down in this way after 2 kids and after 2 pretty old kids, one a teenager and one a pretty old child, I would already have some kinds of red flags in terms of what is going on with him, what happened with their relationship. Is it really realistic that I will have a longer term relationship with this person and that we'll be able to build a foundation that's good and healthy? That's this particular relationship. That doesn't even take into account the fact that this is her 3rd time pregnant, which means there were 2 other occasions in the past where whatever may have happened that resulted in her getting pregnant, and that she already had to go through multiple abortions, which is pretty awful. It's pretty horrendous. I feel awful for people who end up in this type of situation, but also there is a fundamental understanding that I think people need to have, which is they don't end up in this situation by accident. It's not a mistake. Something can happen as a mistake maybe once, but if it's happening twice or 3 times or 4 times, then you're probably making some terrible decisions that result in you being here. And that's something that you need to work on. This is a perfect example of what happens when women do not treat their reproductive rights with responsibility and take it seriously. Take the fact that they have the ability to bring life into the world as though it is something that should be taken and treated with respect. That it is an amazing ability, but then that also means that you shouldn't just be having sex with any old person all the time, and that you should actually pick yourself a partner who you believe will be a good one. So this is pretty rough. Some of the comments here, one person says, sounds like he has 2 faces. If you want to keep your child, then keep it. Just be prepared that he might never come around. I've raised my daughter alone since early in my pregnancy. Her father had never seen her or paid any child support, but she's still the most special little girl in the world. Her father doesn't affect who she is. Now, I want to kind of make it clear. It's not that I even think the guy here is a good guy, or clearly he's not. That's actually fundamentally the problem, in terms of maybe you should pick people who are good people if you're going to engage in behavior that may result in you becoming pregnant. And I think it's really amazing and really awesome when mums have the strength of character and the determination to go, you know what? Yeah, okay, that guy is not a good guy and he's not going to be involved in my kid's life, but I'm still going to give her the best possible life that I can. And I think that's awesome. But I always feel that there is this lightheartedness, this way that people treat single parenthood as though it's just it's the better option. And I understand that in many circumstances it may well be the better option, but I would just never choose to put myself in a position where this is actually something that is likely to happen to me. And obviously you can only avoid so many different circumstances and you can only watch out for yourself so much, but the more you watch out for yourself, the better. OP replies, thank you so much for sharing these words. I want my baby and I don't expect anything from him since he said all of those things. I don't expect him to come around and I don't believe in making him pay child support because that system doesn't really benefit the kids. This is a pretty strange statement to me. I'm not even a firm believer in the idea of, child support being the best system in the world or anything. I don't think that that's the case. I think that at minimum there should be restrictions in terms of women should be required to spend the money on their kids, and it should be kind of separated from just your general income, so that it's not money that just goes to the mother, it actually goes to the child. But somehow I'm actually kind of impressed that she's not the type of person to be like, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to get as much money from him as I possibly can, which a lot of people would do. You can see here she got a reply, well, I personally think child support does benefit the children, their housing, their education, clothes, food, hobbies, holidays, etc. I would certainly make my ex pay if I could, but he moved to another country to avoid it. Another person here replies, I never stopped caring for him. I highly respected his marriage, she quotes from the post. And then she says, how so exactly? He was having an emotional affair with you during his marriage. You allowed it. That was the red flag that you missed, unfortunately. He basically had his cake and ate it too. You're just a rebound, sadly. I'm sorry you were tricked. It's easier being an only parent than having a baby with someone who fights for custody, causes anguish, etc. So good riddance to him. You can do it. You've got this. Congratulations on your pregnancy. And OP replies her. She says, yeah, a lot of red flags. In hindsight, I should have listened to my intuition so many times, but I'm here now. And this is the thing about this. It's just so frustrating. People will often say something like, I'm so sorry that you were tricked. Yeah, he's two-faced. It's his fault for having two different faces and how he interacts with you. And so on the one hand, he's super nice and great, but then the moment that you're pregnant, which I guess fair enough for a lot of guys, the moment you're pregnant, they're like, oh, okay, that's not what I was expecting here. That's not what I want. Then he freaked out and he was awful about it and he treated you like a terrible human being. And he, chances are, will have no responsibility when it comes to the kid either and invest zero time in being a father. And that really sucks. But you know what? Who that sucks for? That sucks for the kid, first and foremost. Like, it sucks so much for the poor child who has no responsibility to bear in any of this, and who does deserve a stable, secure household with two biological parents who care about him or her and are invested in raising them. And so this idea of, I'm sorry you were tricked, implies that as the woman in this situation, you could not have done anything to avoid it or to foresee it. Where I would argue, if you're already describing your relationship with a man as a situationship, then you should be extremely careful about not getting pregnant under those circumstances, like extremely careful. And this is your responsibility as a woman. One other comment here, she says, you say the past 2 years you've been in a situationship, but he's only been separated and divorced recently, but supposedly you respected his marriage. These details don't add up, and it sounds like you helped to trash this guy's marriage, which is terrible, but he's at fault too, obviously. I can't relate to that situation, but I'd advise in the future not to mess around with men who are married, because it will only cost heartache. They like to have it all and give the mistress nothing commitment-wise. As far as a pregnancy is concerned, it's your choice. He can't dictate whether you terminate or not, and if you want to keep the baby, keep the baby, and screw him. He can go F off. And OP replies here, she says, we reconnected while he was separated, no marriage ruining over here. The only thing I can say is I know now that you must let people recover, because I was definitely used for emotional and obviously physical comfort. I see these things in hindsight. And that's really, I mean, I guess hindsight is 2020 and all. I understand that sometimes you end up in these situations and then you kind of have to live with them. But this is just a perfect example of a situation where this is not a person that I would have been intimate with. This is not a person that I would have invested time in a relationship with without so much more care and just actually investing time in knowing who he is as a person and what type of man he is and how interested he is in a long-term secure relationship. This idea of being used for emotional and physical comfort just makes me roll my eyes quite hard. The next one is titled Debating Missing the First Year of Child's Life to Better Myself. This is written from the husband side. I say the husband side, I rather mean the dad side. So he says, let me just start off by saying I'm not abandoning my kid. I very much cannot wait to be a dad and will 100% be there. And also I'm 31 years old. That said, 6 years ago, I was told I'll never have kids. Surprise, when I found out the girl I was dating ended up pregnant. We ended up splitting because she just wasn't good for me. She never cared about my problems, always made me feel small, and that my issues were never important and my opinions never mattered. She was like this before she became pregnant. Fast forward 7 months, we're very good friends. I've been to every doctor appointment and ultrasound. Just recently, I met a woman who is literally everything I've ever needed and wanted, from personality to looks, literally everything. Only thing is, she lives 12 hours away. The state I live in has a terrible economy and I'm in horrible debt and I can never catch up with how much they pay here. Where she lives, I'll be making literal double what I am here. I'm very much thinking of going there for a year to pay off my debts, fix my credit, and be with the other woman. I would move 5 months after my son is born though. My thought process is I'm going for my happiness, but also going so my finances can be repaired and I could actually afford to give my son everything he needs properly. I'm at a crossroads and any advice would help greatly. Now, this is also another one of those situations where it probably was not the best idea to get pregnant. And I know he says that he was told by doctors that he will never have kids. But you know what? Doctors are quite often wrong when it comes to things like fertility. They will often say, yeah, there's no way that you're going to get pregnant. And then that 1 in a million chance actually ends up happening in your particular situation. 1 in a million is already much, much rarer than the majority of infertile diagnoses that doctors give. So that already sucks. But that already kind of tells me that they probably weren't that careful and they didn't use protection or birth control when they should have. And so she ended up pregnant. And obviously under those circumstances, again, both of them are to blame, especially the woman who has control over her reproduction. Now, what is really rough about this one, it sounds like he actually wants to be an involved dad. And it also sounds to me like he's making excuses for himself for why he could get out of it. It's like my impression from reading it, and maybe this is unfair, but my impression from reading it is that he wants to go chase the woman that he's found because he thinks that she's the woman of his dreams and he really wants to be with her. And I actually understand this as a choice, but I would say that if you have a child coming, then you kind of have responsibility to that child as well. And if he's saying, I'm going to miss the first year of the child's life to better myself, then I would probably say that you're going to miss out on a lot. There's a lot of bonding time there that you're going to miss out on, especially since you currently have a very good relationship with the mother and may be able to have a successful co-parenting relationship together and a really great co-parenting relationship. So that kind of sucks. This is just my impression though. At the very least, if I wanted to move away and I said, for my finances and for my relationship, it would be much, much better if I were to move, then I would still be like, okay, I'm still going to try and visit once a month, once every 2 months, even though it's a whatever level of drive away or whatever type of flight I would need to take. And I would count those expenses as part of my decision to decide to move as well. And this would be a conversation that I would then have with the mother, because I'd sit down with her and be like, okay, these are my current circumstances. I need this period of time, but I still really want to be involved. How can I make sure that I'm still as involved as I can be? How often can I visit? How much time can I spend with the kid? How can we make this work together? And maybe like once out of 3 times or once out of 4 times she can come over with the child instead, and then you still get some time there. This would be my focus if I were really committed to being a good dad and to being an available parent, so not an absent parent. But from his perspective, it sounds like, I just want to take off for a year and then then we'll see. Then I'll come back and the kid will be 1.5 years old by that point, because he's going to only leave when the kid is 5 months old. Then the kid's going to be 1.5 years old, and now I have to start from scratch in terms of building a relationship with this kid. And I'm not saying it isn't possible to do it. It's definitely better for you to go and come back and try again than it is for you to go and just not bother with the kid anymore. But I'm not sold. I'm not sold that that's how that's going to work out. Some of the comments here. One person says, leaving would be the worst mistake. Man up and be 100% present for your child instead of going to chase a piece of over your flesh and blood. And another person agrees with that. She says, or he says, kind of have to agree the mum is going to do all of this by herself. 5 to 6 hours of a drive means that he's not going to want to visit all that often when it comes down to it, especially if he has a new girlfriend there. Kind of sounds like he's looking for an excuse and a justification to go and do whatever he wants while she handles all of the bills and all of the childcare solo, which is incredibly hard. Frankly, I'd be surprised if she's okay with this too. And I wouldn't expect to pay off debt when you've got a kid to help support in a totally different household several hours away. And so that's definitely one of the questions from the finances side of things, right? There's obviously the move itself is going to cost a bunch because moving is expensive. If he is actually committed to the kid, then presumably he'll be contributing monetarily as well to the child. And then if he's really committed to the kid, then presumably he's going to want to visit him as well. And so all of these things will add up from a financial perspective. Plus the fact that if you're moving to a place with higher salaries, then generally speaking, you're also moving to a place with a higher cost of living, which means your expenses will be up as well. And so really, as far as it seems to me, he's just looking for excuses here. Some other comments, looking for some info here. 6 years ago, you started dating. How long were you together for? How long did you split? Did you both try to work on things? There's a thing called limerence, which I highly recommend you look up. You may not be in love with the mom and she may not be the one, but I wouldn't flip your life for this other woman when you have a baby on the way. And I'm not sure if the finances are just an excuse, to be honest. When your subject line said to better yourself, I thought I'd read something that said working on yourself, not chasing another woman who you think is the one. And maybe it's a little bit unfair to be so critical of him for having this connection with this woman that he wants to pursue. But there's something about the way that he described it where he was like, I think that she's the perfect thing, that everything that I have ever needed or wanted in one person I have found. And that somehow makes it seem like his focus went from, I'm going to be a great dad to my son, to I want this woman. And that's obviously not good. Final comment here, she says, it sounds like you're running away from your responsibility as a father for a girlfriend. Yes, it would be a crappy thing to do, either step up or step out. IMO, in my opinion. The grass isn't always greener. It really has nothing to do with bettering yourself. I think it has everything to do with selfish intentions. I would resent you, and I'd rather you signed over your parenting rights if you're going to abandon your child, especially in the first 1.5 years of their life, which is when a mom needs support and help the most. That's a no from me. And so I think that this is very much how most mothers would react in this situation. And it seems to me like a shame because he does actually seem like a pretty decent guy. It's impressive to me that he managed to build enough of a good relationship with the mother that he can attend, all the doctor's appointments and ultrasound appointments and so on. And I think I would be so crushingly disappointed at the end of that to then have him go away during when the kid is very, very, very young. So that sucks. Is also one of those situations in which I would not choose to bring a child into the world if I could have helped it. The next one is titled, Please Help, Husband Advice. My husband is constantly angry. The house isn't clean or I didn't do something. I'm 37 weeks with a high-risk pregnancy. I usually just put up with him speaking to me like this, but it's emotionally exhausting and makes me feel terrible. In these, he's mad I didn't pay rent before the first. I was going to go Monday and get checks in order to pay it, but I landed in the hospital for 2 nights. He never called to check on me, never asked how I was, nothing. I've talked to him before about him speaking to me this way, but nothing has changed. He always says stuff like this. What can I do to change it? Any advice? And then she has a couple of screenshots here from the texts that they sent to each other. I'll read some of them out. So the husband says, you need to call the office about rent. I'm getting checks on my way to work. And she says, I will. And he says, not you will. You're going to do it now. And she says, I will call them right now. I just talked to her. She said it's fine. It's not even late. And that to even be considered late, it would have to be on the 4th. But I told her we'll pay it today. And he replies, can you just shut the F up? I asked you to please pay it and you didn't. And she says, yes, I was explaining. Yes, I was just explaining. I know, I'm sorry. I needed to get the checks. And he says, that's awesome. You explain all the time. I'm over it. And she replies, it's my fault. I know. I'm sorry. He says, quit saying I'm sorry because you do it all the time. You're not sorry. Just effing leave me alone till I get home. She says, all right. And then again, afterwards, he says, you better clean too. Now, this is the kind of way of interaction that honestly, I'm just filled with so much despair. I don't know how, there's so much missing context here, but I cannot imagine that men start speaking to their wives in this way, 5 years into a marriage. That doesn't make any sense to me. So as far as I can assume, there must have been red flags early on in the relationship. I don't know how long she's been married to him. I don't know how long they've been together. This may be their first kid and may not be their first kid. Who knows? But everything from she was in the hospital and he didn't check on her. She was in the hospital for 2 nights and he didn't write to her. He didn't say anything. To he's complaining that she's not cleaning when she's 37 weeks pregnant with a high-risk pregnancy. 37 weeks is towards the end of your pregnancy, so she's getting very, very close to giving birth. That is the time when you are the least active, the least mobile, and especially with a high-risk pregnancy, doing a lot can be detrimental to your health and to the health of the baby. So he doesn't care about her health. He doesn't care about the health of their baby. He is incredibly snappy in a way that I would call verbally abusive. And he doesn't actually seem to show her any kind of compassion or understanding or care about how she's doing in general, despite the fact that she's struggling, and she's struggling while carrying his child. That's pretty horrendous. This is a pretty horrendous situation. I know that there's a lot of reasons that people end up in abusive relationships, and I also completely understand that people often don't perceive it as abuse from their particular situation, and it takes a lot of distance and maybe time to be able to change your mindset and to change your perspective. But this is just one of those situations where I'm like, this person is a horrible, horrendous human being, and I don't know why you're letting him treat you like this. That she keeps apologizing to him kind of makes me want to be sick, honestly. There's something about her responses to him that gives me the impression that she's terrified, or she's just a doormat and she's just letting him walk all over her because she doesn't have enough self-respect to tell him to stop, and that this is not an acceptable way to interact with your wife. So this is pretty awful. This is a really dark one. One person here says, don't take this personally, but there's nothing you can do to change it. He either needs to see a therapist and change, or you need to leave because it's not going to get any better once baby gets here. He may be stressed or going through his own stuff. If this is your first baby together, but at 37 weeks, especially with being hospitalized, you don't need his stress added to your own. Marriage is a partnership, and frankly, he's not being a great partner. You need to have a calm conversation about him going to therapy or anger management. And if he can't have that conversation or doesn't follow through, it's not good to stay in that situation, especially with a baby. And here I would actually even say that this comment is giving him too much the benefit of the doubt. The assumption is that he just has some anger management problems and he's actually otherwise kind of decent. She says, yeah, he's marriage is a partnership and he's not being a great partner. He's being a horrendous partner. He's being the type of partner that actually harms you and brings you down at a time when you're really vulnerable and need support. So this is pretty awful. And I say this as someone who believes so strongly in the idea of marriage being permanent, in the idea that bringing kids into a healthy household, part of bringing kids into the world should mean that they come into a house where both mother and father are present and involved. And I really, really hate the idea that, that piece of advice that people throw around all the time of the first time you hit problems in your marriage, then you should walk out the door. I think this is terrible, and I don't think that that's a great attitude at all. But there are some hints in this one where I would really put this under the umbrella of this is an unhealthy, toxic, borderline abusive relationship, and I do not think that this is a good environment for a baby or for her. The next person here says, is he short? I dated a short guy one time and he spoke just like this. He sounds like a very insecure man who has an extremely fragile ego. And this kind of makes me really sad. Like, I don't know, poor short people, short men especially. I know short men don't often get a lot of praise from women, and I know women have this whole thing about wanting to date a tall guy, but this is terrible. Like, this is one of those really discriminatory statements that you would make about someone based on their appearance that's just totally out there and not fair and not helpful at all. So that one is quite sad. Now you can see here another comment. This person says, the issue isn't your husband, it's you calmly talking to him, apologizing and trying to reason when he's a straight up verbally abusive a-hole. You don't deserve to be talked to in this way. I never jump right to leave, but you're weeks away from giving birth and he speaks like this. Kids can shake up even the strongest relationships. Where on earth did he learn how to treat women? And OP replies here, she says, I do this because if I don't, it makes everything so much worse. He'll start screaming and throwing stuff and just be even worse. I realize I need to leave because I'm scared of him, honestly. And there I would say is the proof that this is an abusive relationship. So if the way that she can interact with him is by being super apologetic and making herself small and trying to be non-threatening, and the alternative is him screaming and throwing stuff at her, then that's a terrible household. So this one really sucks. I feel terrible. You know, I want to make it clear that it's not that I think women are to blame when they end up in situations like this. But I do think that even if you are a victim, and even if you do not have a support network, and even if you are 37 weeks pregnant, in many ways, especially if all of those things are true, then you owe yourself the time, the opportunity to get out of this situation. And I just hope that for everyone out there, that if you see red flags early on, that you catch those red flags early on and you don't continue down a longer path and a longer relationship with a person who is abusive and who treats you badly. The next one here says, do you think your experience with motherhood depends on the man? Does a good man or dad mean you will have a positive motherhood experience and additional children? Now, the additional children part of this, I think, is kind of questionable. So people decide how many kids that they want to have based on a bunch of different things. A lot of the time it's just a matter of preference. Yes, I can understand that some people, especially people who say that they have a terrible experience with motherhood, whether it's the pregnancy was hard or the birth was like a traumatic experience, or they just really struggled with raising a child, that then afterwards they might be like, okay, you know what, I don't want any more kids. I think that's fair enough. But in the majority of cases, I actually don't think that the decision to have kids is so dependent on that. I think a lot of people make the decision to have additional kids, even though they had a bad experience the first time around, or they might still be in a struggling relationship, they might still be struggling situationally with their marriage or their partner or whatever else. So I just want to separate that part. Fundamentally, though, when it says good man dad equals positive motherhood experience, yeah, not necessarily, not in 100% of cases. Some people will still have a harder motherhood experience. I don't want to say that they'll necessarily have a bad motherhood experience because of it, but yeah, there's some element of the motherhood experience that's not so dependent on the partner. However, having a partner and or a support network in general makes your life so much easier as a mother. Like, so much easier. I know that I am one of those people who thinks, generally speaking, that your mindset and how you deal with problems changes a lot how you actually feel about them and what your overall experience is. So I think that you can control how you feel about a situation by just changing how you think about it. And this is something that you can choose to do differently. However, I do really, really think that it would be naive to claim that not having a good partner has no influence on what your motherhood experience is like. And I mean, I did a Regretful Parents Reddit episode where a lot of the people there complaining tend to be single mothers, especially because single mothers really, really do struggle. And yes, some people manage to be single parents without the same level of struggle, and that's awesome and amazing, and I admire it deeply. But I would always make the choice to have a good partner with me than to try and handle all of these struggles that you come across not only as a parent, honestly, but in life, in life in general. I think every problem you come across is much easier to handle if you have a good partner by your side. And if that person is a good dad and you have kids, then that's twice as important, because kids really do need fathers as much as they need mothers. Now, I can see some of the comments from other people, because they're really interesting. One person here says, no. And it's problematic to base your experience of motherhood or anything really on anyone else. You have the responsibility to take ownership of your own experiences. Motherhood is an emotionally complex, challenging, and rewarding transition. Your individual experience of being a mother will depend on many things, such as your own childhood experiences and relationships that were modeled by your parents, your own mental and physical health, your cultural identity and expectations around motherhood, how financially fit your family is to handle the pressures of motherhood. Honestly, the list goes on. And having a good man and dad involved can certainly help, but your experience should not depend on this. Additional children have absolutely nothing to do with how good of a dad he is. Families choose to expand or not for many reasons, and plenty of large families have unfit fathers and mothers. And another person here replies saying, I agree, a person can have an excellent partner and have a bad experience with motherhood. The opposite is true as well. Plenty of people have a terrible non-existent partner and have an amazing experience with motherhood. What a shame that people allow others to dictate their lives like that. Our own mindset is completely under our control. Factors play a role, of course, but the way we process things, our resiliency and our tendency towards or away from positivity are under our control. We can't control what others do, but we can control how we react, both internally and externally. And like I said, this is a perspective that I really appreciate and is very rare to see on this forum. I admire it a lot. And I do believe in it. And I think that this makes a huge, huge difference for people. That said, being a parent when you're like just completely by yourself is a much more draining experience, and it's just a lot harder. You can play the game on a much easier level if you have a partner with you, and children do need dads. So yes, it just completely makes a difference in terms of how easy the child is to handle, makes a difference in terms of discipline, because having both parents present makes it much easier to discipline a child. The amount of attention that they receive from their parents is totally different, because when you're a single parent, then you just don't have the time to invest as much attention, to spend as much attention on your child as you should, or as they would be getting otherwise. And obviously when kids don't get attention, then they feel lonely and sad and depressed, and start acting out. So there's a lot of knock-on effects from being a single parent, or having a totally absent, neglectful parent in your life that completely changes how the kid behaves and what it's like as an experience to parent them as well. And so I do think to a large extent, you're kind of lying to yourself if you really say, it's 100% under my control how I respond to this situation. And you can see people actually took this quite personally. One person here says, saying your enjoyment of motherhood is all about mindset is not true. That completely ignores systemic issues that affect the lives of mothers every day. And another one, you're just contradicting yourself. You said it's not about your partner, but your mindset that controls how you feel about motherhood. That's the most toxic positivity take on being a mom. And some more detail that this person added. I'm saying you can't positive mindset your way out of capitalism, a lack of maternity leave, college tuition price, daycare, lack of maternal mental health care, and so on. I just really dislike putting the emphasis as to why someone had a positive or negative experience with motherhood on mindset, as that totally ignores all of the other things that make mothering unsustainable in America particularly. And the really sad thing about this, actually, that is kind of a lie, is that I would argue that being a mother in America is much easier than being a mother in 90% of the world. There are a lot of other areas and a lot of other countries in the world where being a mother is a much more difficult experience. The sad thing about all of this, we always argue from this position of privilege, and we always argue about privilege, and we say these subsets in our society are way more privileged than these other subsets. So I, for example, am extremely privileged that I got to have a long maternity leave, and I understand totally that for a lot of women in America, this is not like, that's not there. They can't afford that. And I do really believe that sucks, and it's a horrific experience, and I would totally want to change that if I could. However, even the women in America who are not able to have maternity leave are still significantly more privileged than a lot of other places in the world where women just have zero time whatsoever. So it's always this question of like, mindset does make a difference. And the idea that, you know, capitalism and the lack of maternity leave and not having daycare and college tuition prices, like, no, I'm sorry, none of these are things that actually make being a mother unsustainable. There's a lot more that goes into being a mother, and actually the first thing is having a partner. Honestly, that's the thing that makes the biggest difference to your experience of it. Next one here says, this is an intersection question. I lived in a hellish relationship with 2 kids. I cried often, felt helpless, felt like a crummy mom, but loved my kids and wouldn't change that. I felt like I couldn't be my best self no matter what in that environment. It brought out the worst in me. Fast forward, I'm remarried to a good man who gives me everything I could have ever wanted. We have a baby plus my 2 other kids, and now I'm always happy and grateful. My experience is completely different because I'm not struggling and sad and fighting. And so that's, I like that one because she's just upfront about it, and it did change her experience of being a mother and how she felt about it. Next one says, no, we are in control of our own minds and how we choose to view and process things. Can a bad partner make it harder? Yes, but that doesn't mean that they have control over your thoughts and how you decide to live. We have the ability to choose to respond to a bad partner in a number of different ways. We can't control what people do, but we can always control how we react. I would never allow my relationship with motherhood to be negatively influenced by another person, let alone to influence me to the point where I would describe motherhood in its totality as a bad experience. That is quite extreme. And I really love this comment, honestly. Like, this is one of those comments that makes me feel like, okay, there's a little bit, restores my faith in humanity just a tiny bit, especially after subreddits like Regretful Parents, where a lot of people really do allow this whole negativity to control everything they feel, not only about motherhood in general, but about their child as well, and how they interact with their child, and the amount of bitterness and resentment that they have towards their kid, who is obviously completely innocent and has absolutely no responsibility to bear in that situation. It just makes me super sad. So I'm really glad that there are some people here who say, I would never let that negativity influence me to the point that I would say that motherhood is a bad experience. I think that's awesome and quite admirable. And one other person here says, no, I am a single mother. The biological father is in no way in the picture at all, and I have been having a great motherhood experience. I find being a mother extremely easy, even with a high needs child. I don't think having a good partner would make my experience any better. And I do have the knee-jerk response of, I'm not buying it. I'm pretty sure having a good partner would make your experience better, but it's also amazing that she is in that situation and that she's having that experience, and she still has a really positive one on the whole. Like, that's really awesome. The final one is titled, Comments about his ex's body when pregnant and postpartum are worrying me. He hasn't wanted to be intimate while I'm pregnant, so it's been about 5 months now since we've had any intimacy beyond cuddling, which is okay. I know his job is stressful right now, mine is too. I wish we could be intimate, and I think about it all the time, but I try to be compassionate and understanding. The only thing that's really got me worried is thinking back on some comments that he made to me about his ex that I should have seen as red flags, and I'm starting to stress myself out thinking about what might happen when I'm postpartum. He and his ex had a really horrible relationship. They fought a lot, and she ended up cheating on him multiple times before they eventually split up. He told me that they got into arguments because he would try to kindly tell her that she was overweight after having their child and tried to help her to get healthy again, but she just blamed him for her getting fat and refused to try. He mentioned that one time they were having sex when she was pregnant, and he looked over at the mirror over their dresser and immediately lost his erection because of how fat she looked. Not her baby bump, but her whole body. He's made quite a few body shaming comments to me about how she looks now, several years later. Tonight, I made a comment about how I feel like a balloon because I've been swollen the last couple of days and have gotten some stretch marks on my upper thighs. He said, "You'll go back to the way you were, don't worry about it." And I said that not everyone bounces back like that. He immediately responded with, "You're just going to blame it on getting pregnant. You can bounce back, you just have to actually try." I explained that I just meant that not everyone goes right back to how they were, even if they work out, and he didn't respond. I tried to just go to sleep, but I couldn't stop from crying, thinking about how he might make me feel if I don't get my body back right away, and then I got myself into a downward spiral thinking that he already sees me that way, and that's why he doesn't want to be intimate with me. I'm already an active person. I work 2 jobs and I'm on my feet all day. I still work out when I have the time and energy. I'm part-time military, so I try to stay in shape because I will need to prepare for PT tests once I'm cleared by the doctor postpartum. I don't want to have to feel like I'm not doing enough, and I'm scared that I didn't read the warning signs when he said those things to me about his ex. This is quite scary. I think if I were in this situation, I would also find it quite scary. To me, the thing that is most scary about it is that she's not able to have this conversation with him directly. So if he had a problem, like, honestly, I would completely say, okay, yeah, I understand that you think that I'll bounce back, but what would happen if it takes me a year? What if it takes me 2 years? What type of bouncing back do you envision? Like, what's actually important to you? What was it about your ex that really was such a big problem for you? Was it the fact that she wasn't willing to work on her weight at all? And how did you approach that with her? How did you discuss it? What did you do? Did you do anything about diet? These are all questions that I would have for him. And that's not even counting the main problem that she has, which is the lack of intimacy. That should be a conversation that you're able to have in a marriage as well. So I find this, I mean, I say marriage, I don't even know if they're married or not. Maybe they're just, partners. I find this quite, like, I am one of those people, honestly, just to be very direct and very, very open about it. I do not want to become overweight. And I definitely had the concern when I got pregnant because I put on quite a shocking to me amount of weight during my pregnancy. I was kind of like, man, this is actually really terrifying. And I'm not into it and I don't enjoy it at all. And I also know that my husband would not find me very attractive if I was overweight, in the same way that I would not find him very attractive if he was overweight. And so we're both very direct with each other. If he ever put on enough weight that I noticed it and had a problem with it, I would mention it to him and he would do the same to me. So we're very upfront there. I do not think that this is fundamentally body shaming because I don't think it's so much about the looks, although it's partly about the attractiveness of it. It is largely about health. And especially when you're still pretty young, the idea of putting on weight gradually over 20 or 30 years of living together is not a prospect that either of us find particularly appealing. We definitely think that will restrict our lives in old age a lot. So that's where we are as a married couple. I find it really just a giant problem that people are not able to have these conversations with each other openly and honestly when they are married or when they're together or when they're having kids together, especially. And especially when it comes to pregnancy, where you do have this experience of putting on a ton of weight. For the majority of women, you will put on a whole bunch of weight while you're pregnant. And, a lot of that weight is the weight of the baby, the weight of the placenta, the weight of the fluids in the amniotic sac. These are all normal things. Like you cannot change that. Just even the blood volume, your blood volume goes up by like 50% when you're pregnant. So there are physiological changes that are very, very different from putting on actual just fat, which I guess is what this is talking about and what this is referring to. And that isn't even to say that you won't put on fat as well, because you will put on some fat as well. That is the way that it has to be for your body to be able to sustain another human life. And so it's not even so much about the weight part. It's really just about the fact that they can't talk to each other and she doesn't trust him to talk about it. And the way that it's interesting to me that she says he told her all of this way before, but she didn't even register it as a red flag until now. She's having this experience where they're not intimate and she's pregnant. And suddenly she's like, maybe that was the problem. And so I don't understand, again, how you end up in these situations with people who you just cannot trust to this extent. I totally get that sometimes you do trust them 90% of the time, and then every now and then they say something that makes you go, that's dodgy. I don't quite understand where that's coming from. But to not have enough security in your relationship that you can say, I think that this is a problem, and I have all of these terrible thoughts about these things that you said to me before about your ex, and it's making me feel really insecure, and the fact that we haven't been intimate for really long is making me feel really insecure. What's going on? How can we deal with it? What can we do together that this doesn't happen to us, and that I don't feel like you hate how I look, which is a really major problem. I think it just makes me very sad that she does not seem to be able to have that conversation with him, because I think that fundamentally that's the only thing you can do. The only thing that will make you feel better is if you actually sat down and talked to each other about it, and he gave you the impression that he still appreciates you for who you are beyond your appearance, and that his understanding of bouncing back, I would hope, is not that not that your body will look 100% the same post baby as it does pre baby, because there will be changes, and probably a lot of those changes will be sustained. So it's not that your body will completely go back to how it was, but that does not necessarily mean that your weight needs to be significantly higher for the foreseeable future just because you went through a pregnancy. And I would be very curious to know, like, how much of a difference did he experience with his ex that this stuck in his head so much that he still makes these comments years afterwards. Like, that sounds strange. OP adds a little bit more here. She says, another thing that plays in my head was that he told me that he's just a visual guy and that he can't get into it with girls that don't look a certain way. He said this following a comment on my body after I had gone through really difficult training that caused me to lose some weight. And he mentioned that I had the best body of any girl he had been with. A few months after the training, we both returned to our normal healthy weight, and he never made a comment like that again. Now, I don't know, maybe he just really likes ripped women. Seems like that might be the case, in which case I probably would try to explain to him that being ripped as a woman is actually not very healthy for you. It's not very good for your metabolism, and it's not very good for your hormones. It's not very good for your long-term health as a woman at all. Men can maintain a much lower body fat percentage than women can for a much longer period of time, just because they also don't have like hips or breasts. The next one here says, he sounds like a jerk to me. I was so self-conscious during my pregnancy, and my husband always made sure to let me know how beautiful he thought my body was, regardless of the weight gain. Even now, 16 months postpartum and the heaviest I have ever been in my life, my husband constantly tells me how much he loves my body and that he doesn't care about my weight because I carried our son, and that's beautiful. He doesn't just say these things, but he shows me as well. If I complain about my body or my weight, he lets me know that he will help me and support me in my weight loss journey if that's what I want, but also reminds me that I've carried 3 babies and my body is strong and beautiful. And it's really amazing to me when people have these types of conversations and they have this kind of relationship that husbands really are totally open with it and they don't mind weight gain at all. I think that's awesome. I would, for myself, always say, like, I would not be comfortable with myself at 16 months postpartum if I'm saying something like, this is the heaviest that I've ever been in my life. I would probably say 16 months postpartum is enough time after having a baby that, you know what, I could change it. And yeah, okay, my body has gone through a lot and has carried lots of babies, and that's awesome, and I'm amazed that my body was able to do that, but I just do not want to carry a ton of weight on me for the rest of my life. And I don't think if my husband were to try to encourage me to lose weight, that makes him a bad husband either. Next one says, unfortunately, I don't think he will change after the baby is here. This doesn't sound like a pregnancy or postpartum thing. This sounds like he's just a body shaming pig, period. I'm sure that's not what you want to hear, but I want you to be prepared. He will likely be very critical of your body during postpartum. He will likely put unnecessary pressure on you and make comments about what you're eating. I think you should prepare for this now so that you can try to avoid these things if possible. You're going to have plenty of things to be emotional about during postpartum. Please don't let him add this to your plate. And to this, I would fundamentally say, you need to talk about it before you get there. Like, come on. The way that people always, I don't understand how this comment is meant to be helpful, because it just sounds like fear-mongering to me. It sounds like saying, yeah, you know what, postpartum is going to be really awful. You can expect him to be a totally horrible person during your postpartum period as well. And therefore, if you just mentally prepare yourself for this experience, then it's going to be less painful than if you're not prepared for it. And maybe that's true to some extent, but you know what, if I actually care about myself and I care about my baby and I care about my relationship, I would not want that to be the case. I would want him to be on my side, and I would want to feel supported during that time as well. OP replies here, what's confusing is that he always wants to eat unhealthy, take out meals together because we love food. He always tells me to eat or tries to get me to have the last of whatever we got. Even before I got pregnant, we would always enjoy our food together. He just thinks that women can work out, lift weights, and they'll stay what he considers fit because that's what works for him as a tall, slender male. I have to tell him all the time that I don't need to eat the same portions as him when we're eating together. He doesn't seem to understand that when I was the ideal body type to him, I was physically exhausted every day and not getting enough food to sustain myself in a military setting. And that makes it very clear to me that you guys need to get on the same page in terms of what are his actual expectations towards your body? Like, how does he think that you're going to look? What are his expectations from a dietary standpoint? Because if he's encouraging you to eat a ton of unhealthy fast food type meals, then this is obviously a problem. Then he's giving you mixed signals here. And if he really is just totally unrealistic and he has this image of the perfect woman and she's kind of like a bodybuilder type woman with less than 10% body fat, then you do need to have a conversation at some point about how that's not real. Like, he needs to understand that that's not a thing that actually exists in real life that women can sustain for a long period of time. So this is one of those examples where you get pretty far. We don't get any hint at all of what the rest of their relationship is like. You get pretty far in the relationship. Now you're about to have a child, but somehow you still seem to be on totally opposite ends of the spectrum about quite fundamental and important things that matter to both of you. And this idea of how attractive you feel to him and how attractive he feels to you and how open you are about that, like that's the foundation. Like, that's a really big foundation of any healthy relationship. So you have to be able to talk about these things together. This is another one of those circumstances where I would say, how did you end up here? And why are you having a child with someone who is making you so insecure about yourself that you're not even sure how you're going to get through the postpartum period without him bringing you down? That's really rough. That's all we have time for today. Feel free to like the video, leave a comment down below, and subscribe for future content. I will see you in the next one.